Hey everyone, Jen here, and today we are going to be making the square in a square quilt block pattern. This is in our series of quilt block patterns that are just the blocks, and then you can piece them together into any project that you want. There are numerous sizes of these, and we've actually split them up into a smaller bundle and a larger bundle. So I believe it's like 2 through maybe 6, I think, is smaller, and then 7 and up is in another bundle, so you can mix and match. So today we're going to be using the 9-inch square for the sample, and then in the second video for the actual project that I put them together for, we are going to include the 3-inch squares so you can see the size difference. These are all already made, and I hooped 3, let's see, excuse me, not 3, 6 in a hoop for an 8x12 hoop. So you can do 6 3x3s. You probably could do 4x4s too. It would be tight, but so you can load up a bunch of the same smaller sizes in a hoop and do multiples at a time. So, all right. So with your file purchase, you'll have a PDF with the cut chart. So follow the cut chart and you'll be good to go. The only thing you really need to take into account is directional fabric. So because the square in a square does face diagonally, the sardine print that I'm using here, I did cut my square in accordance with that directional fabric. On the outer triangles, it's a little bit more difficult. You can absolutely use directional fabric. You just have to probably cut 2 squares so that you have all of the patterns facing whichever way you want. So that's something you might want to play around with. I'm going to use a solid or a blender fabric on the outer pieces just to make it easier on myself. So you have 2 squares. That's all you need. You need a lightweight tearaway, which is, I use these Tear Easy by Sulky. That's what I've used in all of my quilt block videos, and it's linked down below. So you need the Sulky tearaway and your 2 pieces of fabric, and then we'll get started. All right, so your square in a square, the center square does not need to be trimmed down. So follow the cut chart and cut your square for the center. The outer square we're going to cut into diagonally both ways. So you're just going to take your ruler, and you could mark it if you need to. I don't. So you're going to line up corner to corner and trim, and then don't move it. Go to the other corner to corner and trim. So now you have your 4 triangles for your sides, and I clearly need a new blade, but you get my drift. So you'll have your 4 triangles. So 4 triangles and your center square. And next up, you're going to load up your tearaway into the hoop and go ahead and run placement stitching, which is step 1. Okay, so for the YouTube video, I have the hoop turned horizontally. On most flatbed machines, your hoop is going to be vertical. So this is the top, and it's just because it's easier to see in the video this way. So the fabric, that matters for you if you're viewing because of how I'm going to place my directional fabric. So step 1 is already in place. So this is your full placement stitching for your pieces. So you're going to take your center block and you're going to place it in the center. So I cut mine a little bit larger, so I have about a 1/2-inch seam allowance around the edge. If you want to be a little tighter, that's okay. Our cut chart does give a pretty generous seam allowance. So if you are a little bit tighter on fabric, feel free to run your placement and measure yourself. On the larger pieces, you do need to account for, you need a seam allowance of at least a 1/4 inch on the outside for putting these blocks together. So keep that in mind. So once you have your center fabric where you like it and straight, you're going to go ahead and take this back to the machine and run step 2, which is going to tack your center block into place. Okay, so my center fabric is in place. So because I left a generous seam allowance, I'm going to trim down my fabric to roughly, and this is roughly because you are doing this in the hoop, 1/4 inch. You want to have a seam allowance. My favorite scissors to do this with are literal kids craft scissors. They are sharp enough to cut the fabric, but they really won't tear up your tearaway. So because of the blunt edges. So Amazon, your craft store, whatnot. Okay. So the first triangle we're going to place is going to be the upper right. It's going to go clockwise. So right, bottom, bottom, top. So if you're not using directional fabric, this doesn't matter which way. I don't care which way the cross hatches are. If you do care, it's best to like lay them out and say, do I like how this looks? Okay, fine. So right side up first if you're trying to check direction. Then what you do is you flip it over right side down, line up your triangle fabric to your center square here. Make sure you have plenty on each side. The next step is going to tack along the center block. And then when we tack it into place, we're going to flip it over and continue tacking down. But I will show you after the tack down and then we'll do the flip. Okay, so our center block is in place. So for the next 4 pieces of fabric, it's going to start on the upper left and go clockwise around. So if you're using directional fabric, you can always place it right side up to get a feel of where that fabric or how it's going to look. So if you place it right side up, you'll just simply flip it over right side down. And then if you think about how your fabric is going to go, you flip it over like this and you can see, do I like the placement of that print? So again, if you're using directional fabric, that's how I check to make sure that I like it. Because this is a blender, it doesn't matter. So we're going to take our first triangle, place it right side down, and line it up with your seam allowance of your center block. The next step, 3, is going to tack down at the top of your triangle. Okay, so our first triangle is tacked down at the top. If you have too much of a seam allowance, you can go ahead and trim that now. Mine is a little bit over 1/4, but I'm okay with that. So we're going to leave it. So next you're going to take your fabric and flip it right side out. And this is where you need to make sure you have a generous seam allowance around the outside because we need at least 1/4 of an inch. So when we build these blocks into something else, we have a seam allowance. So you're going to, you can tape this into place or you can hold it. Sometimes your fabric will just stay over, but you need to make sure it stays, tight so that way you don't get any puckering. So go ahead and run the next step, which is going to tack your fabric all along the outside. All right, so our first corner is complete. You can see here's our tack down here. And the reason we do that for this is because it will help you keep everything together when you go to piece your blocks together for whatever project you're going to do. So the next corner is going to be the upper right. We're going to repeat the process. We're going to fabric face down and line it up with your center square, just like so. You're going to run your initial tack down, and then you're going to go ahead and flip it and continue around the outer edge. Okay, so our top right is done. You can see how nice those look. So the next steps are exactly the same. So you're going to do the same steps on the bottom 2 corners. So it's going to go right, then left, and then stitching will be complete. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and run the steps and attach both corners, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about trimming. All right, so our block is complete. So once you've completed all of your steps, we are going to go ahead and remove it from the hoop. And just for reference, the stitch time on this was exactly 5 minutes. So these blocks are very quick to do projects, so don't be intimidated by these. All right, so we're going to turn it over. And I want you to leave all of the stabilizer in the center of the block. This is going to help keep your blocks stable, and you're going to sew them together with the stabilizer in the center. And then once you have your project finished, then you're going to remove your stabilizer. So I am going to be making a table runner, and we're going to do another video on that, putting that table runner together. And I will remove the center stabilizer once I have my whole top piece together, and then I will quilt it and all that good stuff after that. But for the initial piecing, you want to leave that in there. That's going to help everything stay straight. So here we are back right sides up. So you can see here's my sardines. So now you're going to take your block and you're going to trim. You're going to add 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from the stitch line. So the block itself is 9 inches. All of these sizes are exact. So you need to add a seam allowance to have a finished block of 9 inches. So you're going to take your ruler and line up the 1/4 inch, this black dotted line, right on top of your outline stitch. And you're going to trim. So we're going to trim off the excess. And now we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on that side. So you're going to go ahead and do that with all 4 sides of your block. And if you're used to paper piecing, they kind of do this for you, but you could see the process from that. People, if you haven't actually paper pieced, it's pretty fun, and that's where all these blocks, the instruction basis comes from. So, all right, last side here. Okay, so here is our block, and you can see what I'm going to do is once the block's complete, I'm going to add, I have a bunch of the little blocks like we were talking about. I'm going to piece these together, 1, let's say 2 and 3. So these are 3 inch, and they do look bigger, but that's okay because we have the seam allowance. So this is going to end up being, once they're sewn together, 9 inches. So we'll do a whole second video on how I put together the quilt block. But for now, you have your quilt block, and you can turn this into tons of different projects. You can make tote bags. You can use it on device sleeves. You could, again, make the table runner. You can make pillowcases, anything under the sun, and you have a wide variety of sizes. So hopefully this is helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.